Hey, mop guy, center mat, now, Blake Harrison barked, his voice slicing through the quiet focus of the Philadelphia dojo. His third Dan black belt was cinched tight, a stark banner of his authority under the harsh fluorescent lights. Let's give the class a little show. Elias Cole didn't stop his work. He continued guiding the heavy mop over the floor, erasing the scuffs left by the advanced class that had run late. At 45, he'd been the janitor here for a month, a silent figure who only appeared after the last student bowed out. "I'm almost done here, Sensei," Elias replied, his voice even and low. He didn't look up from a stubborn rubber mark on the hardwood. "Don't want to hold up your instruction." A loud, theatrical laugh erupted from Blake. It was a sound meant to command attention. "Look here, everyone. The help is afraid to step on the tatami." A few of the 10 students chuckled, a nervous, uncertain sound. Others shifted their weight, their discomfort plain on their faces. They had seen this side of their instructor before. What they didn't see was the ghost inside Elias. The man he had spent 25 years, more than half his life, trying to kill and bury. 25 years since a ring, an accident, and a promise that had cost him everything. A secret he guarded so fiercely, not even his own daughter knew the man her father used to be. "Come on, it's easy," Blake sneered, closing the distance. He wore the same condescending smirk he reserved for absolute beginners. "We'll just show my students the difference between a man who dedicates his life to the art and a man who just cleans up after him." He deliberately mispronounced the name on Elias's uniform. "What is it?" "Elias." A familiar fire flickered deep in Elias's chest, a dormant nerve suddenly shocked with life. His eyes finally lifted, meeting Blake's for a single, charged second. In that instant, a flicker of something ancient and dangerous passed between them, forcing an involuntary step back from the instructor. Blake cleared his throat, his arrogance now laced with a faint tremor of uncertainty. "It's just an educational demonstration, nothing serious. A lesson in respecting the hierarchy." Elias placed the mop and bucket aside. He rose to his full height, not with the stiffness of a middle-aged janitor, but with a fluid grace that seemed utterly out of place. Across the dojo, the remaining students fell silent, sensing the air had suddenly changed. "All right," Elias said, his voice a dead calm that precedes a hurricane. "But when this is over, you will apologize to your students. You will explain to them why you turned their dojo into your personal circus." Blake's laugh was brittle this time, thin and forced. "Apologize? Buddy, the only thing you'll be apologizing to is the floor for hitting it so hard. No one in that room could possibly know they were watching Elias, the anchor Cole, the 5-time world champion who vanished at the peak of his career. He hadn't just retired, he'd performed a disappearing act, haunted by the death of his best friend and training partner, Leo the Fury Diaz. He had sworn an oath on Leo's grave, never to fight again. But some oaths are forged in grief, and some are broken for the sake of dignity. Blake Harrison puffed out his chest, basking in the sudden, absolute silence. "Everyone, circle up. You're about to see why there are levels to this. Why a warrior is a warrior and a janitor is a janitor." Elias watched the 10 students form a loose, hesitant circle. He saw the mix of morbid curiosity and genuine unease. A young woman with dark, intelligent eyes, Alina Sharma, a brown belt, muttered something to the man beside her, who just shook his head, his disapproval clear. "Here," Blake announced, gesturing grandly toward Elias. "We have a perfect example of someone who doesn't understand that certain people belong in certain places. An elite dojo is not for, well, you get the picture, that familiar sting. The same prejudice he'd heard from ringside hecklers 25 years ago. The whispers that said a fighter who looked like him could never be a true champion. But the rage that had once been a wildfire in his youth had long since been banked, compressed into something far colder and infinitely more powerful." "Sensei Harrison?" Alina Sharma's voice was quiet but firm, cutting through Blake's monologue. "Perhaps we could just finish our cool-down exercises? It's getting late." Blake's head snapped toward her. "Miss Sharma, are you questioning my methods?" he asked, his voice dripping with menace. He used her full name as a weapon. "Sit. Watch. You might actually learn something." Elias saw the fear in Alina's eyes, but also the defiance. It was the same look he remembered seeing in the mirror a lifetime ago, the night he got the call about the accident that killed Leo Diaz. "He died because of you." It was that simple. A sparring session where Elias, fueled by the racist taunts of an arena crowd, had lost control. Leo had dropped, his head hitting the canvas at a freak angle. He never got up. The official report called it a tragic accident. Elias knew it was a failure of his own soul. "So, Janitor," Blake sneered, circling him now like a hyena. "You gonna show us that guard? Or is forming a fist too complex for a guy who holds a mop handle all day?" The nervous laughter from the students felt like gasoline on a smoldering ember. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue?" Blake taunted, his confidence surging again. "Or are you just going to stand there like you're waiting for the bus?" That's when Blake Harrison made his first and most critical mistake. He reached out and shoved Elias's shoulder. It was a light, dismissive push, an act of casual dominance from a man who had never been truly challenged. But Elias didn't move. He didn't even brace himself. He simply absorbed the force as if it were a raindrop. His feet were like roots sunk into the foundation of the building. To Blake, it felt like shoving a granite statue. The arrogant smile on the instructor's face vanished, replaced by a flash of disbelief. "Interesting," Elias murmured, almost to himself. The word was quiet, yet it landed with the weight of a hammer blow in the silent room. "It's been a long time since anyone's put their hands on me like that." There was a dangerous stillness in Elias's voice that changed the air in the room. It wasn't anger. It was the unnerving calm of a man who had faced down demons far more terrifying than a bully in a dojo. Blake, unable to read the flashing warning signs, chose to double down on his arrogance. "Did you hear that?" he shouted to his students, forcing a laugh. "He thinks it's interesting. Let's show him the difference between thinking something and knowing something." But every demeaning word, every condescending gesture, was awakening a part of Elias that had been deliberately starved for 25 years. It wasn't a thirst for revenge. It was the crystal-clear, razor-sharp memory of who he was when he stopped hiding. Alina Sharma watched, her fascination as a student of kinesiology overriding her fear. She saw it, the subtle shift in the janitor's breathing, the way his muscles held a tension that wasn't rigid but coiled, ready. It reminded her of the documentaries she'd studied on apex predators, the absolute economy of motion before the strike. Elias closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. He was no longer in a Philadelphia dojo. He was back at the Crucible in Reno, 25 years ago, standing in the deafening roar of the crowd before his title fight with Ivan the Siberian Volkov. "Look at him," a voice from the stands had cut through the noise that night. "He doesn't have the chin." 3 rounds tops before the Russian puts him to sleep. Elias had won. A technical knockout in the second round. But the victory felt like a curse. The pressure from the ugly racist taunts had coiled inside him, and in a sparring session the following week, he let it explode. It was that loss of control that led to Leo Diaz's death. "So, Janitor," Blake sneered, restarting his predatory circle, "you gonna show us how not to hold a guard? Or is that too much for you?" That's when Alina Sharma decided she'd seen enough. The brown belt and graduate student had spent the last 2 years authoring a thesis on discrimination and power abuse in sports. What was happening here wasn't just uncomfortable, it was a textbook case study, and she refused to be a silent bystander. "Sensei Harrison," she interrupted, her voice clear and steady. The sudden silence was absolute. "Can I ask a question? Why exactly do you feel it's necessary to humiliate a man who is just doing his job?" Blake stopped, turning slowly to face her. His eyes narrowed into slits of pure irritation. "Excuse me, Miss Sharma, but who is running this class?" "You are," she answered, her chin high. "But that doesn't give you the right to use racial humiliation as a teaching tool." Nervous energy shot through the circle of students. No one had ever challenged Blake so directly. A dark flush crept up the instructor's neck. "Racial?" Blake barked a laugh that had no humor in it. "This has nothing to do with race. This is about discipline and knowing your damn place." Elias opened his eyes. The courage in Alina's voice, the raw nerve of her standing up to a bully, reminded him so powerfully of his younger sister Maya. She'd had that same fire, that same refusal to swallow injustice. Maya had been killed at 17, caught in the crossfire of a street altercation. He was a world away, fighting in Japan, when he got the news. Another soul he loved, gone, while he chased fame in a ring. Another reason to let the champion die and become a ghost. "Alina," Blake said, his voice now dangerously low, "if you can't respect my authority, Perhaps you should find another dojo. One more, suited to your delicate sensibilities. The threat was unmistakable, hanging in the air like poison. Alina flinched but held her ground. My tuition is paid, Sensei, and I believe we all deserve to learn in an environment of respect, not abuse. And then, Elias did something no one saw coming. He smiled. It wasn't a weak or nervous smile. It was the slow, calculating smile of a man who had just been given a reason to fight again. For 25 years, he had carried the crushing weight of two deaths, Leo and Maya, that he blamed on his life in the ring. But watching this young woman fight a battle he had long ago abandoned, Elias Cole began to remember who he was. "The young lady has a point, Blake," Elias said. His voice was quiet, but it seized the attention of everyone in the room. "This was never about martial arts. This is about you trying to feel big by making someone else feel small." Blake spun on him, his face a mask of crimson fury. "You dare lecture me? You who cleans the toilets. You don't know the first thing about what a dojo is." Elias took a single step forward, and the universe of the room tilted on its axis. His shoulders, once rounded from years of labor, squared off. His center of gravity seemed to drop, anchoring him to the floor. His feet shifted into a stance so balanced, so perfect, that any fighter worth their salt would have recognized it instantly. The janitor was gone. The champion stood in his place. "Actually," Elias said, his voice like ice, "I know exactly what a dojo is, and I know this place stopped being one the moment you decided to perform." An animal instinct, primal and cold, shot down Blake's spine. The way Elias now occupied space, the sheer lethal presence he radiated, was screaming danger. But his pride, wounded and cornered, left him no room to retreat. "Enough talk," Blake snarled, snapping into his fighting stance. "I'll teach you some respect." Elias closed his eyes again, just for a breath, and let it all come back. 25 years of muscle memory, of brutal training, of championship fights across the globe, flooded his senses. When he opened them, Blake Harrison was staring into the unblinking eyes of Elias, the anchor Cole, the 5-time undefeated world champion. "Last chance to apologize," Elias offered, his voice devoid of malice. It was a simple statement of fact. Apologize to her, apologize to your students, and turn this place back into a school of honor. Blake's laugh was a ragged, nervous burst of air. "Apologize? I'm going to put you on the floor." He lunged. Blake's pride, cornered and bleeding in front of his students, forced a final pathetic attack. "Just admiring the posture," he sneered. "Get that off YouTube?" The joke died in the suffocating silence. "No," Elias said calmly. "I learned it at a place in Reno. The Crucible." The name hung in the air. Alina Sharma's fingers flew across her phone screen. The results made her blood run cold. It wasn't a gym. It was a legend. The place where champions were forged. "Last chance, Blake." Elias's voice cut through the tension. "Apologize to the lady. Apologize to your students. Apologize for the shame you've brought to this art." Blake chose violence. His jab was a piston, fast, clean, and aimed to punish. But Elias wasn't there. He flowed aside like smoke, and Blake's punch met empty air, throwing him off balance. "Good speed," Elias noted, already repositioned. "But you telegraphed it with your shoulder." A frantic combination followed. Jab, cross, hook. Blake hit nothing. Elias swayed, ducked, and stepped back, each movement impossibly fluid. The fists missed by millimeters. "You leave yourself wide open," Elias observed, his voice a steady, unnerving metronome against Blake's ragged gasps for air. "Fight me!" Blake roared, a desperate, clumsy lunge. Elias slipped inside the attack, suddenly so close he could feel Blake's panicked breath. "You want to know the difference between a gym fighter and a champion?" Before Blake could answer, Elias placed his palm flat on his chest. It wasn't a strike, it was a touch, and Blake flew. He was launched backward as if hit by a car, landing with a sickening thud that stole the air from the room. He lay there, broken not by pain, but by an impossible force he couldn't comprehend. "That's impossible," he wheezed. "It's physics," Elias said, standing over him. "A lifetime of practice." "A career in what?" Blake scrambled to his feet, his legs trembling. Alina's voice, shaking but clear, answered for him. She read from her phone, each word a nail in Blake's coffin. Elias Cole, the anchor, 5-time world heavyweight champion, undefeated. The name, the anchor, shattered the last of Blake's arrogance. His face went corpse white. He had tried to humiliate a ghost, a living legend. If you had known, Elias's voice was quiet, but it cut deeper than any punch. You would have respected me. But what about the next janitor? The one without a title? Does he deserve less? The dojo's office door flew open. Mr. Tanaka, the owner, stood there, his face a mask of cold fury. He'd seen the security alert. He'd seen everything. His eyes locked on Elias, and a flash of recognition dawned. Son? He strode to the center of the mat, his gaze burning into Blake. Take off your belt, he commanded. Sir, Now! Numbly, Blake untied the symbol of his identity and let it fall to the floor. You have brought shame to this house, Tanaka said, his voice like chipping ice. You are a bully, not a sensei. Sign this resignation, or I will ensure you never teach again. Anywhere. He slid a pen and paper across the mat. Broken, Blake scrawled his name, signing away his life's work. He shuffled out of the dojo without another word, a man reduced to nothing. Tanaka turned to Elias, bowing deeply. Cole-san, you have shown my students what true mastery is. Help me teach them. Help me restore the honor of this place, not with a mop, as a master. Elias looked at the discarded black belt on the floor, then at the hopeful faces of the students. The ghost he had tried to bury for 25 years was finally at peace. Yes, Elias said, a real smile touching his lips for the first time. I can do that.